Let's take a look inside box three. I'm really excited about this one because it has some critical tools that I'm so happy to be able to send out to you guys. First up, we have a versatile lightweight polymer mall. We have a roll of black Tyvek, a roll of double-sided adhesive tape. We have black tiger thread in 0.8 millimeter. We have our hardware baggie and a tool that I made up out of necessity. And then we have the leather for our project. This is the Denver embossed side from Tandy and black 1 to 2 ounce lining leather. And then we have a 4-prong 5 millimeter diamond stitch punch. All right, so in order to complete this project, we're going to utilize some of the tools from previous boxes. We are going to need our John James saddle needles because we're going to be doing the saddle stitch again. We're also going to need our, X-Acto style knife, unless you have found one that you like more. We're going to be using our scratch awl, our concave anvil, our snap setter for line 20 snaps, and our punch. Along with these, we're going to add the newcomers, our polymer maul, and a 4-prong diamond stitch punch in 5 millimeter. And last but not least, this is an acrylic stitch line tool that I made out of necessity, just because I couldn't really find anything that would suit our needs and be accessible, so I made one. Also in our box, we're going to have a little hardware baggie that has a 4 millimeter gunmetal D-ring in it and gunmetal snaps in line 20. We also have our double-sided adhesive tape. This is 1/8 of an inch tape. We have black Tyvek and Ritza Tiger thread in 0.8 millimeter in black. The leather that we're going to be using, we're using two different types. This is 4 to 5 ounce blue Denver embossed side from Tandy Leather and 1 to 2 ounce black lining leather, also from Tandy. With all of this, we're going to be making a keychain wallet. This specific keychain wallet is super special to me because it is actually the first thing or the first template that I designed and began making things from over and over and over again and selling. And so this is a little bit altered of a design because I've learned a lot over the years and come a long way, but this main design is a throwback to my original design. Now, this is where my little made up tool is going to come into play. I was trying to figure out how I could have you guys get perfectly straight stitches without having a compass to draw along the edges. So I figured I would just draw one and then like laser cut it. So that is exactly what I did. As with the other acrylic template that I sent out, it's going to have the protective coating on it. You just need to peel it off. I designed this shape specifically because the width or the gap between the rectangular portion and the pointed portion is the exact width that it needs to be to guide along the side of the leather and leave an imprint or a light scratch where we're going to end up stitching. This bottom corner is actually the same exact corner as I designed the wallet and the liner, so in order to clean up our edges at the end, that will give us perfect shape. There's a few different methods on leaving like a stitch groove or a stitch line on your leather. What tool you use is dependent on the type of leather that you're working with. With veg tan, we'd be using a stitch groover, which is coming in a future box. But for this chrome tan leather, we want to leave a little bit of an impression, but we don't want to cut into it, which is what a stitch groover does. So to solve this problem, I made this, little tool, but all you have to do is guide the rectangular side of the tool along the side of the leather, and the pointed side is going to leave the faintest little line on the leather, so as we make our stitch holes, they'll be perfectly aligned. So, slowly and carefully, we're just going to run it along the edges. The corners can be a little bit difficult, but it's not a race, and all we're trying to do is leave a very light impression that we'll be able to see when we are positioning our stitch punch on the edge of the leather so we can put the holes in and we'll be able to stitch. All we're doing is leaving a little mark. You don't have to press super hard, you're not trying to push into the leather, you're just leaving a little marking. The actual tool to do this is called a metal compass, and you can make it wider or more narrow depending on how far you want from the edge your stitch to be. But this is the width that I had set my compass to when I was designing it to. So, I mean, you can use this over and over, but a compass is useful. I'm not saying it's not, because you can move it around and adjust it to be whatever size you want. Now we're going to flip it around and we're going to be working on the back side of the leather, or the rough side, not the finished side of the leather. We're going to leave some markings using our scratch awl. If you have a hard time seeing the markings left by the scratch awl, you can totally use a pen. Nobody's ever going to see the inside of your wallet liner, but it just needs to be visible to you. So the width of the notch on the tool I made is also going to be used to measure the distance where we're going to leave our little markings. So go one length of the notch up and then measure up from that marking one length of the notch. Those lines are going to be lines that indicate where we need to fold our Tyvek to make pockets on the inside of this wallet. So right now we need to position our double-sided adhesive tape. Don't pull off the white backing until we actually place our Tyvek on each line, or else your project's going to get all sorts of stuck together. So this roll has more than enough to complete your project, but just start pulling it off a little bit, and then where we place this is critical. So directly below the pocket cutouts, we want to do a strip. You want to span from the first hole to the hole on the right of it. You want to do this on each of the pocket cuts. So just like the bottom one, we're going to place our double-sided adhesive tape directly below the pocket cut. And we're going to do it again on the other one. Now, once you have placed the double-sided adhesive tape right below the slits for each of the pockets, you're going to place a piece right up top. It doesn't have to be the full width of the other ones. It's just going to hold the very top, but it's also going to get stitched, so the piece doesn't need to be super big, if that makes any sense. And we're going to grab our little black roll of Tyvek. So Tyvek is a woven paper, but it's waterproof. It's actually used for like house wrapping, but we leather workers love it because it is the perfect, lightweight, highly durable material for lining pockets of wallets. It's generally found in white, but Tandy carries it in black with a white backing. And then I got my hands on an industrial roll of black on black, so some boxes will have the white and black, and some will have the black on black, and then the black on black Tyvek is now available on the She Built website. But so our Tyvek, we want to place it with the white touching the um, the rough side of the leather. If you got a box with the black on black, you don't need to worry about it, but you want the white touching the inside of the leather because that's going to make your pockets kind of invisible, because black will be visible through the slits instead of the white. It's not like a deal breaker if you do it inverted, but it looks so much more professional if the black is showing through. So to recap, you remove the double-sided adhesive tape backing from the bottom slot and then place the Tyvek on it. Where you want to fold the bottom is a little less than the length of a debit card, but it also should just align with your stitch line on the front of the leather, because the other two lines will fold where we marked using our stitch line tool. So as you can see, I'm just making little pockets by folding and then attaching the Tyvek to each line of double-sided adhesive tape, repeatedly moving upwards. You want your folds to be higher up each time we go back up. And again, they just need to align with the markings that we had made with the stitch line tool. And eventually you're going to get up to the top slit. You remove your tape backing and then press it onto it. If you stick it in the wrong spot, or if it's a little off kilter, you can pull it off, but I don't recommend it because it's just going to take the tape off and you might not have enough to, redo it. So you just press back into it, and then we're going to go down one more time, fold it on the top mark that we had made with our stitch line tool, and then push the Tyvek all the way up to the top. And you should have more than enough to actually complete this. Just make sure you fold it where we had marked, and then remove your little top piece of tape, and you're just going to adhere your Tyvek to that little adhesive. Now, as we look at it from the front, we see the beginnings of a wallet. The sleek little black pockets have black poking through so it's not visible that there's a liner. And we just want to remove the excess Tyvek using either our X-Acto style knife or whatever knife you want, scissors. We just want to, get it so it's not visible poking out after we stitch it. So it doesn't have to go perfectly along the edge. You just want to make sure it's hidden. Now we're going to bust into our little hardware baggie. So grab that and we'll go over what's inside of it. We have a heavy duty 4mm D-ring. We have a set of line 20 snaps. All of these are in gunmetal finish for those that are curious, and a little yellow donut. So I made this out of necessity, like I do, because I didn't like the thinness of the lining leather. I mean, I love the leather, but over time, the back of the snap, I just feel like it isn't sturdy enough. It might poke through. I wanted to give it some extra durability, and so I wanted to figure out how to give it like an extra barrier. Also, it's so much easier for the snaps to set properly if there's more than one very thin layer of leather. The lining leather is super thin. It's 1 to 2 ounce, which is very, very thin leather, which is perfect for lining a wallet, but it's also very thin leather, so we want to protect it. So all you need to do is slide the little yellow donut, which is actually made out of bag stiffener for those that are curious, onto the bottom side of the snap before putting the snap through our lining leather. Now, just like before, we want to put the base of the snap in through the rough side of the leather and then put the other side of that snap right on top. Since this is the flat portion of the snap, we want to get it on a sturdy surface and grab our snap setter and then give it a few whacks. Test it to see if it shifts side to side. If it does shift side to side, you need to hit it a few more times, one or two. If it doesn't move side to side when you try to twist it, you're golden. Now, when you bend, now for those that are curious about why we put the snap in, it seems so much more protected and not like some metal surface is trying to break its way through. I do it this way because I don't like working around a non-wood. I just would rather not flat surface, right? When I'm trying to install like wallet pockets, and so I throw the snap in after the fact because it's just I find it so much easier. But now we want to grab our double-sided adhesive tape, and we're going to tape around the perimeter of our lining leather. I do this fairly carefully just to make sure I don't go over the edge, but I do want it against the edge. You don't have to do it all in one piece like I am. If it's easier for you to kind of guide it along, rip it off, and then start again at the corner, go ahead and do it. I like it like this because I like to be able to pull off my adhesive tape backing with one pull, but it's just personal preference. If you're going to try and put on your double-sided adhesive tape in one piece, what I'm doing to get around the corners is I'm just channeling my inner seamstress and doing little pleats to give the straight adhesive tape some curve to it. And to demonstrate what I mean by just ripping it off and starting again, I'm just going to do that. We're going to make it almost to the edge, and then we're going to rip, and then we can just place it right back at the corner and keep going. So whichever way suits you, you do it. Now, however you figure out which way works best for you, there's no wrong way to put it on unless you're, putting it on the wrong side of the leather. But after we get our perimeter done, we need to go back and we want to actually stick our Tyvek lining to itself and the lining leather. So we're just going to lift up and put a piece down, rip it off, and do that to the back side of each pocket. And once you have done that, you go ahead and remove the double-sided adhesive tape's backing and then stick each little pocket layer to themselves. With mine, I went a little bit overboard on my adhesive tape and I don't really want it hanging off the edge, so I decided to cut it and then grab a scratch awl because they make life easier when you're pulling off double-sided adhesive tape backings. Pull it off and then press down. And now we have a fully functional wallet liner. A lot of companies sell these pre-made, but I'm cheap, let's be honest. So I always make them myself because you just saw how easy they are to make. And just to make sure that everything is going to work perfectly, I grab a card and test out each pocket, making sure that the card is still grabbable and visible when it's inserted, and we're ready to move on to the next step. For me, I wanted to clean up my edge a little bit, and so I'm just going to tidy it up a teeny bit before I place it on the actual wallet backing.
Now, don't pull off your adhesive backing just yet, because we are going to do one more thing before we actually adhere the lining leather to the backing. Let's grab the D-ring from the hardware bag, and we're going to slide it onto the 1-inch strap. We're just placing it on so we can line up exactly where we want our D-ring strap to sit on the actual backing of the leather, because then we're going to know exactly where we want to place some double-sided adhesive tape to hold it in place before we stitch. So that's what we're going to do. You don't need a ton, just grab a little piece to just kind of hold it, because right below where the D-ring is, we're actually going to stitch, and it's going to hold the D-ring up where it's supposed to be. And before we pull off the backing of the tape, we're just going to place it or position it exactly where we want it to be, because we're going to pull off the tape slowly, piece by piece, and make sure that we stay perfectly centered. Now, if you chose to put your tape on in pieces and then rip it and then put more on, you can pull it off the backing the same way. If you chose to go on one big piece, just pull it off by like a couple inches at a time, and then make your placement, and then pull a little bit more, and then align your placement, pull a little bit more, lather, rinse, repeat. And we're just going to do that to the whole perimeter of our wallet. We're just going to pull off our double-sided adhesive tape backing, and we're going to smooth out in place and make sure that our lining leather is exactly where we want it to be when we start stitching. Now that we have attached our lining leather to our backing leather, we're going to grab some tools. So grab either a poundal board, cutting mat, cutting board, something that you're okay with hitting and kind of, smacking metal into. But this is where the lines that we had made previously are going to come in very handy. What I'm doing is, prior to actually punching any holes in our leather, because once you do it, you can't take it back. So this is kind of one of those measure twice, cut once scenarios when making literally anything. But I'm making some pre-markings on the leather to make sure that I can get a good even distance before I begin actually punching permanent holes into the leather. What this is a 5 millimeter diamond stitch punch, which pretty much means the tines or the stabby parts of it are diamond shaped, and the space between each tine is 5 millimeters. These come in different sizes. There's 3, 4, 5. I prefer 5 for working with these types of wallets, and it's the one that I most commonly use, so it's the one that I selected to, send out to you guys. So as I'm going around, the corners are a little more difficult, and since this is a 4-prong punch, these are available in sets that come in 1-prong, 2-prong, 4-prong, and I think 5-prong. We're using the 4-prong, but in lieu of a 2-prong, we're just pressing 2 prongs out of the 4 into the leather on our curves. And again, we're not pushing all the way into the leather, we're just leaving little indentations. So if at the very end there's a little too much or too little of a gap to get all 4 prongs in, then we can just mark it out and do only 3 holes, or we can add another one. We just want to get even distance. Also, one of the great things about how we made our line on the front side and we made our tentative little punch impressions there, all of that is going to get covered by our stitching. So if you have an indentation that you had made and you don't like the placement, just don't punch through it, and it's going to get covered by the thread. In addition to our 4-prong punch, we are going to be using our scratch awl for the very, very corner holes, so make sure you have that on hand as well. Now we're ready to actually start hammering and punching holes into our leather. Make sure that you align the tines or the sharp parts of your stitch punch with the indentations that you had made that you want to actually hit through. It is very important to hold your stitch punch straight up and down so the holes that go through are also straight up and down. If you angle it to the right or the left, your holes on the back side of the leather are going to be on the right or the left, and it's going to make your stitch lines look super funny. So hold it straight up and down. and then hit. When you're removing your stitch punch from the leather after each punch or each time you hit it all the way through, you want to rock it forwards and backwards to get the tine or the stitch punch out of the leather. This is a pretty critical thing. When you're removing your stitch punches, going side to side will widen the holes oddly and make your end product look kind of weird, but also it can damage your stitch punch by breaking off your tines depending on the thickness or weight of the leather that you're using like in the future. So just get in the habit now of rocking forwards and backwards, just like that, to remove your punch. You'll notice that I'm not going in sequential order with hitting my holes. I'm going for we're going to call it low-hanging fruit, the easiest ones, the ones that take all four prongs. We're going to just punch all the way through, and what we're going to be left with after getting all the easy punches or the easy holes is just the corners, because the corners are going to require a little more technique, but these are easy to just knock out on the front side. What I'm doing is sometimes I'm going in the leather purely with all four prongs on only indentations, but sometimes I'm going to hit through and one of the prongs is going to be going through a hole that I just made, and the other three are going through fresh holes, if that makes any sense. However, you need to place it to line it up to where you can get your stitches even, but you can go into old holes as long as, again, you keep it perfectly straight up and down because it's just going to guide right through the previous hole, cause no damage, and it makes it easier on some of these turns. You'll notice that as I'm going through and hitting, I do sometimes peek at the back side of the leather to make sure that my prongs went all the way through. They don't need to go so deep that they fully go into the surface that you're hitting on. You just want to be able to make sure that they're poking through the leather, and it does get a little more difficult depending on how many layers of leather we're going through. So up here, where we're going through the strap, the lining leather, and the backing, we want to make sure that we're getting all the way through on our punches. This is one of those times where I'm going to re-hit through two holes that I'd already made and make two brand new holes in order to maintain my distance and get evenly spaced punches. And then in the end, our corner holes are all that's left. And since it's far too difficult to try and get one prong out of the four to go through without causing any damage, we're just going to hit the very corner holes with our scratch awl. Since these very corner holes are being hit with a scratch awl instead of a diamond punch, they are going to be shaped a little differently, which won't really be visible at all on the end product, but it will make it a little more difficult to get our double needles through when we're stitching. So just keep in mind that you might need to widen it, which I'll show you when we go through those specific holes. And now we have the body of our wallet is assembled and we need to stitch it. The double-sided adhesive tape holds it basically while we're, preparing our project, but ultimately we do have to stitch it. So we're going to do the saddle stitch that we learned in box 1. So go ahead and grab your saddle needles and open up your thread. Now we're just going to put one needle on each end of our thread, and this is 0.8 millimeter black waxed Ritza tiger thread, so no need to lick the thread or whatever old school stuff we used to do. It's waxed, so you just kind of like press it with your fingernail and kind of sharpen the waxed edge and slide it right through. And now we are going to be ready to stitch. If you have purchased a Stitch Pony, grab it. If not, you're about to see my super fancy way of how I stitch or how I used to stitch before I bought one. Now we're going to start our stitching where there's a little gap caused by the strap on the side of our wallet. That's going to make it easier when we end our saddle stitch because we're going to go through the two layers and come out the side, just like we did in previous projects, but that gap makes it so much easier to get our needles all the way through at the end. So this is where we're going to start. When we pull our thread all the way through, we want to make sure that we end up with one needle on each side of the leather and the threads are evenly distanced. If one is shorter than the other, you're not going to be able to finish the actual saddle stitch, so we want to make sure that we pull them evenly upward. And again, when we're stitching, we want to make sure that when we're trying to press our needles all the way through, we use the thread to push it through. Um, kind of just like pinching your fingers below the needle and using the thread to guide it through, just like this, but not wonky like I just did, because that way you're not going to stab your fingers with your needles. Now, here we're at the exact corner hole that I said might be a problem, and sure enough, it is a little bit tight. And so rather than um, pushing and kind of hurting my hands, I'm struggling to get it through the very corner hole. So I'm going to grab my scratch awl and I'm just going to widen the hole. I do this just by placing it in um, and kind of just pushing, twisting a little bit just to widen the hole a little bit, not to try and get the whole scratch all through, but just to make it bigger than it was by just pushing the point in. So I switched up my angle so you can see what I'm doing, but as you can see, I struggle a little bit to get it through that corner hole, even still, just because the shape of the stitch punch matters so much with the width of the thread that you're using and the needles, which is why I love the diamonds or the diamond stitch punches. But the scratch awl definitely works. It just requires a little more effort. So, as we were going through stitching, I'm just going to talk about the leather that we're using a little bit. This floral embossed hide is actually from Tandy. I know I mentioned that earlier, but these are available in multiple colors. They're beautiful. I actually make journals out of these. I make wallets. It's so pretty. I've made some like belt pouches out of this leather. It's just, I don't know. I saw it and I loved it because I do love florals, but this this leather in particular, I wanted every single color and started buying it a couple years ago, and I don't know, I love it, and I'm excited to be able to um, get so much of it that I was able to use it for the box, but I love it. The black leather is, yes, lining leather, which is actually pretty hard to come by. The lining leather generally needs to be super thin, just you don't want to add too much bulk to your items, but this is also from Tandy. Now, here's the thing about various leathers. I've talked about it in various videos on TikTok, but the way all these leathers are made is that the top grain leather is literally just the top of the leather or the exterior. So look at your skin, it's the top layer. What happens to everything else below it is it gets shaved off and kind of repurposed or refinished. And so lining leathers, you're not going to find a lining leather that is top grain. It is a split that was shaved off to a specific thickness and then given a new finish, which is totally normal. It's just the way leather is processed, but they're not created equally. A lot of the times, things that are sold as lining leathers, it's just like the yucky painted leather. So be weary of it. A lot of the times, it's pigskin, and if you're looking at cost per square foot, like those are easier or more affordable to buy a whole hide or a calf hide because they're smaller, but you get way more bang for your buck if you're willing to buy a side, which is just a side of a cow, um, and you get the whole side of leather, and they tend to be better quality, in my opinion. There are some super nice little small hides, as they're called, that you can use as lining leather, but I mean, if you're looking at cost per square foot, which is generally how leather is sold, if unless you're buying it by like full hides or sides, which is generally how I buy leather, I recommend biting the bullet and just buying one of these lining hides because you can use it for so many projects. And keep in mind when you buy a side of leather or like a panel, they're all just different cuts of cows, but they have defects on them. So you're not going to buy 3 square feet of leather and get 3 perfect square feet of leather because that's just not the nature of the business. On those square feet that you bought, there might be brands or scarring or holes or anything because it's leather. If you buy something that's perfect, it's probably, the mystery meat that I talk about in other videos. It's mystery meat leather. It's mushed together kind of like particle board, um, or MDF, and it's just mushed together and then given new coating, and it is pretty, but it's not actual durable strong leather. So, I don't know. Basically, you might buy 3 square feet, but you might not be able to use all 3 square feet of it if you're not okay with defects and markings. Both of the leathers that we're working with in this box are chrome tanned leathers, but veg tan leather that's coming next month, it's sold on a grading system. Obviously, A is more the prime or pristine, and then it becomes a little bit less, pristine. More you get into the alphabet. So B grade, C grade, D grade. D grade is going to have the most defects and markings to work around, and it's not bad leather. It's just not pristine leather. So you get what you pay for. If you're going to buy an A grade hide, you're going to pay top dollar for it, but it's going to have very little stuff on it that you're going to have to work around. If you buy a D grade hide, you're going to have to work around cuts, markings, brands, holes, which there's nothing wrong with that. I have bought many a D grade hide just because I have no problem kind of getting creative and working around it, because there's still pristine areas of the leather, but the whole hide is not pristine. So it's just one of those things where you kind of just get what you pay for. But in reference to these leathers, so they're both chrome tan leathers, but obviously they feel very different. They look very different. The lining leather is thinner and processed a little bit different. The backing leather is a pre-embossed, more oil tanned hide, which is one of the things I love about it, is that it's not a pull-up leather, but it does take on its own patina over time, depending on how it's folded and used. They're just beautiful, but they're both chrome tanned leathers. But they look like, distant cousins if you're looking as far as finish. This is where leather gets kind of complicated because you can't just go look for a chrome tanned leather because you're going to see such a vast variety of leathers. But the very specifics of it matter. When we reference oil tanned leathers, they're not actually tanned with oil. You have two options or two flavors. You have veg tan leather and chrome tan leather. Chrome tan leather gets referred to as oil tanned because it's not about the process, it's about the end finish. The oil tan, it feels and looks differently. It's like it's a whole different breed, but it is a chromium tanned hide or chrome tanned hide. It's about what you get after. It's about the feel and look of it. They're oily, the oil is spread around and moving it. They're freaking gorgeous. But when we say oil tan, just know it's a chrome tan hide. Those are your two options: veg tan, chrome tan. And in case that was confusing, to recap, oil tanned hides are chrome tanned. They're just, stuffed with oils, just like you're going to find veg tan leathers that are hot stuffed, which means that they're stuffed with oils, but they're still tanned. Originally, the same way, no matter what. You're either veg tan or chrome tan. I'm going to speed up this end part as we get to where we're going to end our stitch. And how we're going to end our stitch is exactly the way we have previously. We're going to stitch all the way until we get to our first stitch, and then we're going to be pushing our needles through the middle of the layers so there will be no exposed ties or knots on the front or back. Now, just like on previous projects, we're going to finish it by backtracking into one of our previous stitches to just get our needle through one layer of leather and out the middle. Do that on both sides, and you'll have strings hanging out like, the insides of a sandwich, and that's when we're going to tie them off. So do that on both sides. Now we're going to pull tight and we're simply going to tie it off. I double knot it very simply and just give it a nice pull. Once you have securely tied your knot, you can grab scissors or a blade and cut your threads. And voila! Now all I'm doing is grabbing the polymer mall and using the flat surface to press our stitches flat. We're not trying to press hard enough to mark the leather at all, we're just pressing our stitches. Now I'm folding this over to leave a small indentation on the inside of the leather to know exactly where I want to press and then punch a hole for my snap. So that's all I'm doing, just pressing lightly, and what's going to happen is it's going to leave a little circular indentation that can easily just be brushed away, but will visually show me where my dead center point is. Now, grab your punch from last month's box and we're just going to make one hole exactly in the center of the circle impression that we just made. We're going to grab our concave anvil and the rest of our set of snaps, and then we're going to put it together and we're going to set the rest of our snap. And like usual, I kind of hold it weird, but I feel like it gives me the most control. And just like previously, if you feel like your snap might not be fully set, all you need to do is grab a hold of it and try to twist it. If it twists, you need to whack it again. If it doesn't twist, you're golden. Now, all you need to do is make sure that your snaps connect strongly. If for some reason they don't want to go together, give each of them a whack with your polymer mall and the setting tool just to realign everything and then try again. The few times that my snaps don't want to go together, all they need is to be um, just pressed a little bit more and then they click together just as they should. And now it's official. We've made a wallet. I hope you love yours as much as I love mine. Now, if for any reason you want to clean up the corners, go ahead and just use your stitch line tool to guide along the edge to clean it up. Just be mindful that sometimes cutting away too much makes your project looks more wonky, and you are your own worst critic, so you'll see imperfections that nobody else will. So just carefully clean up your edges if you like. But thanks, guys.